I don't hear you. I heard you for a second there, but now I got nothing. Ah, there you are. No? I heard a noise for a second. Can you hear me or no? Give me a hand signal. Oh, you guys can hear me fine, but I can't hear you. Is that, what can I do? I got the volume up. Oh, you know what? No? No? Nothing, right?
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Good. Yeah. Can you hear us now?
Now I got, yes, now I hear you fine.
You change the mic, you change the audio in the settings. Go to the sound, you need to change that back to what it was.
Okay. You got me? You hear me?
You got you, you got us?
I got you.
Oh, hey.
So I want to tell you that shooting from the Earth to the Moon about the Apollo space program was easier than making that connection. So I feel like I'm on the space shuttle here. I apologize. In you know, we had a hurricane here a month ago, and the storm ripped out. Somehow our telephone line got ripped out during the storm, and it was repaired, and our neighbors were assholes, and their gardeners ripped out our cable again. So,
well, listen, as a concession, I've given everyone in the class a job on your next film.
yeah, no problem. You got it.
Okay. They'll be down there.
There may not be a next film. That's the first lesson of Hollywood. There is no there are no guarantees. You know, tomorrow is not promised.
I know.
So,
listen, what we have here is a failure to communicate, I think.
Yeah.
So, it's a room full of people, and people out, a couple of hundred people that are plugged in, and basically, you know, this is lessons in life, and who do we have to screw around here to get started? You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know.
Yeah. The lesson of this week is Harvey Weinstein, obviously.
The massage that you gave him worked out. David did work with Harvey Weinstein. He's still working with him through a lawyer. And he did a film with Harvey with James Corden, and lived to regret it. But here
I love making the movie. I love James Corden. We had a great time shooting the movie, and it's a lovely film that I'm proud of. But not too many people got a chance to see it, and so you know, we've had some a long-running legal battle with the Weinstein Company, and now I'm just one of thousands.
But you're first in love.
Yeah, but it was a fascinating experience. I thought I got the full Harvey Weinstein experience. It turned out that I didn't get the full experience. So, but it's possible that some of our cast members got the full experience.
So we want some. I already have enough advice. They would love to hear your story, but advice for them, whether it's big or small.
All right. Well, I would love to answer questions, but I'll give you a little background on me. First of all, everything I learned about showbiz, I learned from the man sitting on the desk in front of you. And So there's not much I can tell you that he can't tell you, or that he didn't teach me. I graduated college in 1981, and I went to work 2 days after graduation at a company called Telepictures, which distributed and still distributes television shows for syndication. But I wanted to write and I wanted to direct, and I spent nights and weekends writing, and eventually Norman read a script of mine that he liked, and we tried to sell that with no success at all, but we bonded. And during the time that we were working on that, he was asked to create a television show for Ellen Burstyn, which I'm sure you've heard this saga, but and he asked me if I wanted to work on it with him, and we did, and we sat with Ellen, and we created that show. That was in 1985, and then we worked together really closely for the next 6 years, creating TV series and writing movies. He taught me everything about comedy writing that I knew at that time, and then he also encouraged me to direct on a series called Dr. Doctor, and I wanted to do film directing. So ultimately, I created a series called Grapevine in 1991.
About that, David, because that was really a breakthrough show, and for its time, and it was anthological, and I mean, it really was interesting. And you had 2 iterations.
Yeah, we did. Grapevine there was this whole wave of sort of people talking to camera, like in The Office or in Modern Family, or in documentaries, all the time, sort of talking heads. And Grapevine used little scenes and then allowed the actors to comment on the scenes, and that's where the comedy came from. And that sort of taking a documentary approach to scripted comedy, I don't want to say that I innovated it, because I'm sure other people had done it before, but it was certainly the only time when Grapevine was on in the early 90s, was the only time that it was the only show where you could see anything like that, whereas you can now see it in lots of shows. And then that show was not a success in any way. We did 6 episodes, but it was it created a lot. It got a lot of attention, especially for movie people. And so this Disney executives at the Disney studio asked me to write and direct a movie, and Norman actually stars in that movie. He's one of the so it's a movie called Miami Rhapsody, and he plays a very fanciful version of himself, a man who dresses well and makes sarcastic remarks about comedy writers, and that movie starts there. Jessica Parker, Antonio Banderas, Mia Farrow, Naomi Campbell, Paul Mazursky, Kevin Pollak, Carla Gugino. Anyway, a wonderful cast. And that was the start of my feature directing career. I actually didn't make another movie for 12 years. And in between, I directed a lot of. I won an Academy Award for another. It was originally a TV pilot that I wrote and directed, called Dear Diary, in the late '90s, and it never made it on TV, but it did make it into theaters for a weekend, which qualified it for the Oscars, and it ended up winning Best Short. And that got me a lot of work at HBO. So I worked on From the Earth to the Moon and Band of Brothers, then Sex and the City, and I directed the pilot for Entourage, and all of that led to my directing The Devil Wears Prada. And since then, I've done most of my work has been movies. I've directed The Devil Wears Prada, Marley and Me, a comedy about bird watching called The Big Year. It stars Owen Wilson, Steve Martin, and Jack Black, and another movie with Meryl Streep called Hope Springs. Then I did One Chance with James Corden, and then last year a movie called Collateral Beauty with Will Smith and a lot of other movie stars.
In the situation, this program is called TV Writers Studio. And I did it for a reason, because doing films today, doing movies today, is definitely a bitch. I mean, it's really difficult. And I remember I talked to Barry Levinson after he did. He worked on You Don't Know Jack for HBO, and as a director like you, he said it was so much easier and such a nice experience working at 8. So with them in mind, and there, I tell them to go into television.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, what's your take on it as a writer, as a director today?
You talking about what's my take on the movie business or on the television business?
Movie business and the television.
So, well, the movie business, I started off the business. There was a huge shift financially in the movie business in the last 10 years. So The Devil Wears Prada we shot in 2005. So the very end of what's called the DVD era in movies was probably 2008, with right around the time that Marley and Me came out, and so that was a period. So starting from like the mid 90s until 2008, when the studios would make movies that cost somewhere under $50 million, and they almost couldn't lose money. If you had a couple of stars and it was a reasonably well-made film, and even if the box office wasn't great, the DVD market was so healthy that the studios would at worst break even on the ancillary markets for their film. And so there was still some creative latitude. They didn't only have to make superhero movies or video game characters or sequels or remakes. That DVDs, as soon as sort of streaming emerged as a viable way to deliver entertainment, the DVD market cratered, and that safety net for the movie studios disappeared. And it may reappear in some new form, but right now, the cost of the movies is so high, the cost of marketing them is even higher. The international market is bigger than the domestic market, all of which and all the movie studios are owned by conglomerates, which creates a real bottom line mentality. So that really leads to studios taking very few risks, both creatively and financially. And so what you see is you don't see that mid-level film being made by the big 7 movie studios. So I don't know that a movie like Devil Wears Prada or Marley and Me would get made today. You'd have the fighting advantage of that those were both based on best-selling books, and that kind of intellectual property creates some value for the studios, and they would bet on that. But you see just if you just check what's playing at my local multiplex, it's only from September to December that there's any kind of thoughtful filmmaking. The films that are being distributed, those tend to bomb consistently. I mean, they just don't do well. And you'll find, when they always talk about there's 10 Academy Award nominees, so 8 of them are 8 of them, their total box office adds up to like the one big hit that somehow got nominated. So we're really living in an age of like blockbusters, tentpole movies, and independent films, which are not being made by the studios. They're being, independently financed at under $20 million. They're being made by Netflix and Amazon. Netflix movies, for the most part now, do not get any kind of theatrical release. So it's sort of only Amazon that's daring to put the movies in theaters. And so that mid-level movie where you could have like a couple of movie stars and make the movie on a real, with great production value, because a movie like Devil Wears Prada shot for 11 weeks and Marley and Me shot for 12 weeks. And my last 4 movies have all shot in 7 to 8 weeks. So that's a huge reduction in just the time you have to shoot and the quality of the movie. Not the quality of the movie, but the production value. You just have less time to do everything. And the writing, as a result, has to be less ambitious. And television, obviously, I think we're living in a golden age of television now. And it's unlimited scope of storytelling, and the production value is on par with every movie that I've made, I would say. I think for all the television that's getting made, so for sure, statistically, it's easier to create and sell a TV show these days, which is easier than selling like a movie to the studios, which does not at all mean that it's easy to sell a show. And I can tell you, I'm not trying to be a naysayer in any way, but I have been attached to something like 15 different pilots that have tried to sell in this supposedly hothouse market over the last 3 or 4 years, and one has sold. So and that's with what I thought were great scripts, and with me attached, sometimes with actual stars attached. I had a project with Sarah Jessica Parker and Michelle Pfeiffer attached, and we couldn't sell that to HBO. A lot of the challenges are financial in the TV business. The television networks that are not the networks want to own everything, and the actual broadcast networks are still not making the sort of high-end, doing the high-end fancy storytelling that I think a lot of the streaming outlets and cable outlets are doing. But I think it's all going to merge. Everything will be seen on our phones and in the near future. And so I think Norman is right in saying that the future is television. For great storytelling and for great writing. And I think that the movies will be, will still be a place for an incredible roller coaster ride of thrilling effects. And once in a while, at the end of every year, we'll see a few dramas that really impress. We'll see a La La Land or Manchester by the Sea, or as we did last year. Honestly, and it seems crazy to say in this month, but with the demise of the Weinstein Company, we'll see even fewer thoughtful movies. Harvey, for all his failings and crimes, did encourage the making of more ambitious, smaller films.
I have a question here. Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was wondering if you could describe the process from your role as a director during the making of a film. So, for example, I guess last time we watched The Devil Wears Prada in my apartment, and wondering the script that Aline Brosh McKenna gave to you.
Yeah.
What was her role with working with you afterwards? After she gives.
What was the writing process of that movie? That's basically your question. Yeah. No, but how I related to her as a director through the writing process. Yeah. So that was that project had been in development at Fox for 2 years when I got involved. They had already had 4 screenwriters. They had spent close to $5 million developing the screenplay up to that point. And I read the 4th draft, which had a lot of good jokes in it, but it was, I remember I actually tried to get out of even discussing the movie with the producer because I realized I couldn't direct any of the scenes in that draft. It was a satire, and it had no heart, and it was mean, and it was essentially a revenge tale where Miranda was the villain, and Andy brought her down, and that was the ending of the movie. And and that was almost, I realized in starting to work on it that was the opposite of the story that I wanted to tell. I wanted to make the working women, I wanted to make Miranda the heroine. You know, I mean, I have nothing but great respect for Anna Wintour, you know, and I think it's fascinating, the idea that why do people who are excellent also have to be nice? I thought that was I think that's, Norman happens to be nice and excellent, but most people in show business are one or the other, and most people in life are one or the other, and I think like the world would be a worse, you know, I think we'd be poorer if some of the excellent people had to compromise themselves by being nice, and that was the idea that motivated me, and I wanted to really make a tribute to working women and the incredible sacrifices that women have to make to achieve their professional goals. And so I was looking for a writer who could do that. And Aline, we shared similar background. We gone to school, same college at Harvard, and she had a great work ethic, and she connected with both Miranda and Andy very deeply, and so we sat down to outline the movie together, she and I, very, very, very closely. And she's a writer who is in constant dialogue through the writing process. So we were on the phone every day, no exaggeration, like 6 to 8 hours on the phone as she beat out the story. She would send me pages, she would send me scenes, send me the script, I would give notes, and I would, you know, and Norman is used to this, and you've seen this, you know, when he's counseling you on your scripts, you know, it's a lot of riffing, and if you're taking notes, you get it, you know, you get some great dialogue. And that was the process that we used, where I would just sort of be wandering in the backyard, my backyard, on the phone riffing, and she would be taking notes, and somehow that would turn into some of the speeches and I would pitch a scene, and you know, so it was as if we were writing together, but she sat down, she wrote the screenplay, but it was very much according to the vision of the movie that I had. So, and you know, and then when we got into production, it went the other way. In other words, I was then I was the guy at the typewriter, although I'm on the set, and she was the one who was kind of kibitzing with me and riffing with me. And so I would show up on the set and say, oh, you know what? The set doesn't look anything like what you wrote. So we need to adjust this scene. Or, you know, there's a famous scene in there where Miranda, it's called the blue sweater scene, where Miranda makes fun of Andy's blue sweater. And literally up until the minute that we're shooting it, Aline would be sending me texts with new lines of dialogue and new, I mean, the color of the sweater changed, you know, as we were writing it, things like that. The studio wanted us to make cuts in the movie, so, we had to take out like 10 pages of really good stuff that I wanted to shoot. So we secretly had to shoot it. We had to have like secret pages for the actors. And we went in, you know, totally unscheduled with the cast to shoot some of those scenes that, you know, had seemed like just sort of window dressing or character beats. And they all turned out to be quite important in the movie. So we shot everything that we wanted in the movie. But it, you know, that stuff evolved completely. I mean, the character of Nigel evolved through the casting. You know, there were actors that Aline would rewrite the dialogue for as we were in the casting process. And I didn't actually cast that part until we were 6 weeks into the shoot. So Stanley Tucci was cast like 2 days before he started shooting. And it was only, you know, just luck that all came together. So that was a very intimate process, the writing and directing process. I don't know if that fully answers your question. Yeah.
And follow up
Go
too.
ahead.
So that blue sweater scene I noticed was like kind of shot handheld style. Is that what was that one of the pages that you like shot specifically?
Yeah.
But what I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is like, because it was a really cool effect that I noticed that like you're doing in handheld style. It was very like intimate and like close there. But like I was wondering, I guess, what prompted that for you? What that process was for you?
Oh, is that in the screenplay? Is that what you're asking? Like, is that something that?
No, like well, that's just a directing question for you.
Right.
Of like why you do like handheld style in that one scene.
Which scene? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
The one where Andy calls the sweater like soft, and then
Oh, yeah.
Miranda.
Yeah.
There's-
That was shot handheld because I had no idea what Meryl was going to do, and she didn't want to. She didn't want to be locked down, and I knew that and Meryl had this wonderful approach to acting, which was that she understands that the movie's going to be edited, so she doesn't feel committed to giving you a perfect performance of the whole scene. She knows that she can do one line at a time great, and do one line great, one line okay, one line terrible, forget a line, take forever to deliver a line, whatever, and you'll cut around it and put it all together in a way that will, make her performance brilliant. And that fearlessness on her part, it actually takes great courage to not be concerned with not being great every time in the pursuit of greatness. And that's what makes working with her so easy and so rewarding. And even the editor would watch the dailies and go, God, I don't know how we're going to put this together. She's terrible. And I go, no, she's brilliant. You just have to find the moments when she's brilliant. And so through that scene, she was constantly finding it, and a lot of it doesn't match, she was dressing the model and, but eventually through a lot of takes, she found the rhythms of the scene and made it work. But so the reason to do handheld there was just to, that messiness made editing, putting it together, like all these sort of random moments in the scene together, a little easier. We could, because there were, I don't know that it exactly jump cuts, but there's sort of a freedom to kind of not match perfectly that you don't always have if you're shooting from a dolly.
I remember
Yes.
Dave. Is it? Coming? It's a Florida guy, Tampa. Alex.
I have a question about what attracted you to Howard Frankel's script, The Big Year.
Yeah.
If you could talk about that.
Have you seen that movie?
I have not. I want
Yes.
to, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah.
So, my manager sent me a script and she said, it's a comedy about bird watching. And it sat on my desk for a month because there was no way I was doing a comedy about bird watching. And then there was just something, and 2 pages in, I was ready to call her and say, sign me up. There was something so compelling and so smart about Howard's writing. And, wasn't funny, haha, but it put a smile on my face. And he really captured, for me, what that script is just about a sense of yearning that people have to make their lives into something that they're not, which I think is such a universal idea. We all dream of somehow breaking out of our little bubbles, and especially when it's about men in midlife, and so instead of having the traditional midlife crisis of leaving their families and having affairs, these guys would leave their families to go count birds, and I thought that was so beautiful, and it was so cinematic and so unusual, and also funny, and so those are the reasons that I was drawn to make the movie, and for sure, it's the most cinematic of the movies I've made. It's an incredible travelogue. We shot all over North America to make it, from the Yukon. We were like 60 miles south of the Arctic Circle, all the way down to the Florida Keys. An incredible experience and an unbelievable cast. I mean, even in the smallest parts, there are phenomenal actors, and Angelica Houston is in 2 scenes, and Rashida Jones is in a few scenes, and on and on. Anthony Anderson now is a huge TV star. Got a couple of scenes. I mean, it's just sort of every part was someone that I really admired and respected. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you
Can
talk,
you hear me now?
yeah, if you face the thing, actually, I hear you a little bit. Yeah.
You said 2 pages in, you're hooked.
Yeah.
What is it when you're looking at somebody's work? What lures you into a project, or when you're ready to beg?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to define. It's a little bit like falling in love. It's a little bit like, what is chemistry? What movie stars have it? And it's a similar thing about writing. There's certain writers that, and I think that I think there's a craft to it. So I think it can be, learned, or it certainly can be improved through experience. But there's a tone and a cinematic value and a rhythm and a pace and a sense of humor, even in the stage directions, where you feel in the hands of someone who is going to tell you a really compelling story in a really compelling way. And that's why it was so immediate. And, I think all of us I think you get the same experience. You turn on a movie or you turn on a show, and a minute or 2 in, this is going to be good or this is going to suck, and there's very few times that you're wrong. There's very few times where someone goes, oh, no, it's the first 5 minutes are terrible, but don't worry, I promise it gets better. And it actually gets better. That's rare. Usually, something starts in the right way, and sometimes in movies it's just literally like the first few shots, the right music. I remember sitting in the cutting room and the editor showed me the opening song in Devil Wears Prada, and I was just suddenly I see, okay, I'm sold, I'm into this movie. We got it, and that buys you a lot of time to fuck up. You got the audience for a long time with something that compelling. And I think in writing, it's the same thing. One good joke, one good character description can often really nail it for the reader, or at least keep them going for 10 or 15 pages.
I was telling them when I read the Rouge Club, and I was going through it, there was one description that you made of a character whose eyes were, and there was something about that character, and I just said, this guy can really write.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same reaction I had to my favorite year. I saw my favorite year, and I was so blown away the first time I saw it. I literally went back to the theater the next night to watch it again, because it was just, God, you just didn't see movies that had that inventiveness and that wit, and also just that great appreciation of the movies themselves. So that was, and that's, you get drawn in really quickly. I mean, today if you watch the opening moments of a show like Ozark, or a show like Fargo, or even something I've loved recently is the second season of Master of None. And I think like those episodes all start like in this. I mean, he really figured out like a great topic sentence for how to get into an episode of television, and And a lot of times, for example, in Master of None, it's literally like the song and the font for the title, and the title itself is enough to kind of pique your interest and go, okay, you got me. Even if he's telling a story that has nothing to do with the episode that came before. So really,
but the theme song for Curb Your Enthusiasm, which you got from an Italian.
right? Yeah.
That I was in right away.
Yeah, real see,
because that's.
I think that's true.
Yeah. This is Katie.
Hey, kid.
Hi, can you hear me?
I do.
Okay, good. So, like you, I also want to write and direct. So, but you talked a lot about how like your writing led to opportunities. But like what would you recommend for someone who's more writing experience than like actual like directing experience, but like is just drawn to that? Like, would you recommend like a trajectory towards independent film, towards television, just write nonstop and see where you fall? Like, what advice would you have?
Well, one of the great things that I think you have a little bit of freedom is that making a movie now is an easier thing to do than, when I was your age. Which you literally can shoot a movie on your iPhone today that captures your voice, and you can make a 5-minute film, and you can see if you can actually distribute it. People can see it, and they can tell you what they like about it and what they don't, and they can motivate you to try something different the next time. And I think that's, I really think that's the best case scenario, is to do it. I think for both Norman and me, that everything was in the doing. You could talk about this stuff forever, and you could write stuff and plan shots and all that, and until you're sitting there in the crucible of the clock ticking and actors staring at you and wondering what they're supposed to do, and a crew wanting to get on with it, you won't know whether you can do it or not. You won't know whether you really love it or not. And that's that's what you want to do. And you don't have to start big. I mean, you start small. A friend of mine made a fantastic web series. I'm gonna forget what it is. I'll look it up and I'll send Norman the link. But she made a series, which I guess she sort of directed it. They did it she and another actor did a kind of semi-scripted improv about two people who were set up online. One lived in New York and one lived in LA. I think it's called 7 p.m., 10 p.m. So it's like 7/10 or something. And so it was 7 p.m. in LA and 10 p.m. in New York, and they called each other online. And so the show is their conversations. They make a deal. We're going to talk every night for 30 nights and see if we hit it off. And you can find it on YouTube, and it's really funny. And they talk each episode is like 5 or 8 minutes or something, and it's really funny, really sexy, and it's directed like stuff happens. But it's really simple in its way. And I love that she took like a very conventional form, this form, literally, and made a show about it with a narrative, like, is this relationship going to work out? And it was a way to do a romantic comedy in a really new form. And that's what I really appreciated. That was always my ambition. That's where how Grapevine came about. And then the other show I did, Dear Diary. And, Sex in the City was really a riff on Grapevine. Darren Star, the creator, actually sold it to HBO, saying, I'm going to do Grapevine. And if you look at the style that Sex and the City had in the first season, I don't know if you remember it, or you're even familiar with it, but the characters there would be scenes, and then they would stop wherever they were and turn to the camera and talk, like break the fourth wall. And that ended after season 1. But that kind of directorial approach, you know, is something that's the kind of stuff that you get to play with as a director. And you can try stuff like that, you know, on a small scale, making films. So that's, I mean, if I were starting out today, that's what I would do. I think like trying to build up, sell yourself as a director into the, you know, the military industrial complex of Hollywood these days is pretty hard. You know, I mean, I have friends who have done it, who have made small films and raised the money, $1 million, $2 million, made films. Just getting them distributed after you've made them is impossible. I mean, or nearly impossible. You know, the numbers are so overwhelming. There are 600 to 800 submissions to Sundance every year, and you know, 50 movies get in. So that means, you know, 500, 600 people made an entire feature film with real actors and real money, and they, you know, and then it never even got seen at a festival. So forget about it, you know, being sold around. But the flip side is, you know, you can make a web show that millions of people see, and that can launch a career. I don't know if that's encouraging in any way, but I hope it is.
It sounds exactly like getting a book sold. My follow-up question is, for like resources on like filmmaking craft, what do you recommend? Are there any books in particular? Any you know, like master classes that you think have really you know, some good food for thought? Interviews or documentaries that really
wow. You know, get Norman Steinberg to be your mentor. That's the
I just went with them on books about how to fashion stories, and you know, come on.
There are no books. I'll say there are no books. You know, I mean, I don't want to say that. I mean, I'm sure you can learn a lot. It's important to know the history of Hollywood. It's important to read William Goldman and Adventures in the Screen Trade. I think that's an important book. It's important to know as much about the history of Hollywood as you can, and to read about the making of movies like Citizen Kane or Cleopatra, or you know, Casablanca. You know, and I mean, just the more you know about the fact that very little has changed in this industry over 120 years, that the process of writing has always been hell, that the studios have always been, you know, misogynist creatures of the night, that the, you know, that money is always, the business is always more important than show, that, you know, that, I mean, you know, Scott Fitzgerald drank himself to death as a screenwriter. You know, like that Faulkner couldn't make it as a screenwriter. I mean, like, it is crazily difficult to do what we all love to do, and the more that you understand that, and understand that the processes of making and directing movies have not changed for 120 years. It still involves actresses getting on a couch with a producer and begging for their part, and it still involves, you know, directors tearing their hair out as the sun sets and they don't have the shot. I mean, none of that has changed, and once you know, knowing that actually gives you a kind of confidence, because you realize that it has been hard for everyone. You know, I was really inspired. When I was making Band of Brothers, I worked with the same costume designer who had done Schindler's List with Spielberg. I don't know if any of you guys have watched the Spielberg documentary that's out on HBO now. But So she told me a story. She had sat with Spielberg. She needed the in the costumes when they do the when in Schindler's List they evict the Jews from the ghetto in Krakow, and so they sat and they planned the costumes for the Gestapo. Spielberg wanted these very specific long coats. It was going to be cold, and they wanted it to have a certain metallic sheen, I think. And anyway, but they were on a very tight budget. So instead of using she was English, but instead of using her London sources, she decided to use some Polish sources to make the coats. And they took a long time. They were way behind schedule, and she didn't actually get the coats until the night before. And she opened the box, and they didn't have the metallic sheen, and they were the wrong color. But she had nothing else. So the next morning, the Nazis put on these coats, and Spielberg's standing there in the square, and the cameras are set, and here, cue the Gestapo, and out comes the Gestapo, and it looks like a bad fashion show and he's horrified. What are they wearing? That's not at all what we talked about. And she goes, I'm sorry, but I only had so much money, and I used it. She explained the whole thing, and why she had the wrong coats. And he was furious, but he said that, well, never, if you have a budget problem, come to me before, we end up with the wrong coats. And I said, well, what did you do? I mean, she said he shot the scene with the wrong coats. And it's in the movie, the wrong coats. And that, to me, gave me so much confidence, knowing that, like, okay, when I fuck up and I get the wrong shot, or I hire the wrong actor, or they're wearing the wrong coat, it's in the movie. It doesn't matter. The audience doesn't know what was in your head. That's a key thing to learn about directing. The audience doesn't know what you hope for. They don't know what the writer hoped for. All they know is what's on the screen in front of them. And if that is compelling and interesting or distracting or goes by so quickly they don't notice, whatever, that's what they know, and they don't question it. That's the reality that you created. And that's the fun, that's the terrifying part, and also the incredible freedom of directing. I will say, and I don't know if one little sidelight, which is, and then I'll get back to your question. The key thing that Norman Slattery taught me, and I quote this to every actor, from Meryl Streep, Tommy Lee Jones, Steve Carell, Owen Wilson. He taught me, he used to say to actors when they walked in the room, I'm a letter. And I don't know if you've heard that from him, and what he meant was, the actors come in, he said, you come in and do one take of the scene as written, and then I'm going to let you do whatever you want after that. I care about what I wrote, and I want you to commit to it with all the passion that you have. And after that, I want to see what you make of that moment. And I don't care whether you do my words or your words or somebody else's words. And that again, the confidence to have that, to allow creative collaborators to have that freedom, is the key thing that makes my work fun. When I make a movie, 99% of the time, I'm the least experienced person on the set. I have been on the fewest number of sets. I've spent the fewest days on a movie set of anyone on the crew. The assistant prop master has been on the set 10 or 20 times more than I have. And that's true of usually even of the PAs. They've spent more time on sets than I have. And so as a director, I never tell anyone what to do. The four key words of directing to me are, what do you think? And that's the approach. So you want to pour all your precision and focus into the writing. You want to get it to a point where you love it, where if someone actually didn't invent anything else or wasn't creative with it, they, you know, I mean, then there are actors who hate to improvise. Sarah Jessica Parker, for example, hates to improvise. I'll just do what you wrote. That's great. And then there are actors who just want to riff, you know, and and the same is true of costume designers. Same is true of production designers, lighting, cameramen. You know, the same thing. You want to give them the latitude. You never want to say. And by the way, if you watch documentaries about Kubrick or about Woody Allen, Mazursky, they were all the same. You know, Kubrick would plan the shots meticulously. You know, little maps on the floor plans and footprints and designs and squiggles and then he would walk into the actors and go, "What do you guys think?" And then he rework it. And that's so, you know, and that, I really encourage that. It's like you want to have a plan, but then the most fun thing is to allow that plan to improve as it goes, not just to be executed. All right, there was a question in the back. Yeah. And then I think I might have to move because my battery is running out. I'm sitting outside. I might have to move inside. So I have my charger here.
Hey, my name's Rory.
Hey. Your hat doesn't say "Make America Great" on it, does it?
Luckily not, no.
Not yet. I don't let them in the room.
Exactly. I was wondering, obviously you've done a bunch of directing. How do you usually, or rather, do you usually get approached to direct, or do you seek out these projects?
It's kind of a hybrid. So the studios often will, you know, and Devil Wears Prada is a good example. They'll nurse a script along until they don't know what else to do with it, and then they say, okay, we should get a director and get his vision in and help him. You know, we're on the 20-yard line, and the director will get us into the end zone. So they often will send the script out kind of on a fishing expedition to see which directors respond. So a lot of times that's where I would get the script, and you know, in case of Prada, that's when I got it. And then they will sift through the responses they get and see who they're interested in, and so that's one scenario. Another way is, yeah, sometimes the agencies will have a script that they haven't sold, but or production companies develop something that hasn't sold to a studio yet. I think The Big Year probably fit into that example, or Hope Springs for a long time was like on the blacklist, screenwriting blacklist, and it sort of floats around, and then I would read it and go, God, this is something that's great. I wonder, you know, will my participation help us get it sold, get it set up, get somebody to finance it? You know, unfortunately, I mean, and this is, you know, a hard thing. I mean, the movies that I have been, where the studio was really keen to make the movie, have worked out pretty well, and the movies where I was the catalyst for getting it made have not worked out as well. Historically, the one that doesn't quite fit that model is Collateral Beauty. That was, you know, the studio was very keen to make that movie. They were really excited about it all the way through the entire production process and the testing of it, and then it got hammered by critics, which they did not foresee, and then was a box office disappointment. So it really happens both ways. You know, but to this day, you know, I could be, you know, reading in the New York Times, and there's a book recommended, and I go read the book, and I call a producer and say, hey, have you read this? And it gets optioned, and we hire a writer and develop it, and you know, that process is still available to me. And at the same time, I'm reading scripts that are being floated out by the studios. You know, it's presumably movies that they're trying to get made.
The one here with your SWAT. Okay. Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie.
Hi.
Just in your personal opinion, what do you think there's too much of on the market, and what would you like to see more of?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is not a really insightful comment, but there's too many superheroes, and there's too much comic book stuff.
Yeah.
So what there's almost none of now is romantic comedy, and I'm not saying like everybody should be out doing, writing, the Wedding Planner or something. I mean, that's not. But there, what I hope somehow, and I don't know that, I don't honestly know how we'll get back to it. I'm hoping that maybe the streaming services are actually now have become the independent film world. Like Amazon and Netflix have almost completely taken over independent film, and they are making movies for $1 million, $2 million, and all the way up to $100 million. Will Smith made his most recent movie at Netflix, and I think that I'm hoping that those, that we get to see just more thoughtful, witty writing. Norman and I grew up in an era where we worship Woody Allen, and it's hard to do that these days, knowing the man behind the curtain. But what we admired so much about it was the thoughtfulness, the great joke writing that was accompanied by genuine thoughtfulness and genuine intellectual curiosity, and a genius about creating characters and about casting. And I still feel, and you see, for example, like Noah Baumbach just released the Meyerowitz diaries or stories or whatever, and he's trying really hard. Noah Baumbach is someone who's tried really hard. There are probably a dozen other people kind of almost making a living, making thoughtful, ambitious, smart movies, and that's, I still feel like the audience loves that when they find them. I feel like there's not enough of that. There's a great show, by the way. There's probably one of the best examples of the kind of the genre that I'm talking about is by it's on Netflix called, it's not called Love. It's by
Easy.
Easy. Thank you. Yes. Easy. Have you guys studied that show? That guy is super talented writer director, and brilliant casting, really thoughtful, and I gotta say, and that kind of anthology thing, sort of explore, just reinventing, making little movies essentially, and I think that's, I kind of feel like that's the future. That's what we all want, like something that's like digestible. It's kind of a short, but it tackles big ideas, and the characters are bold and funny and sexy. That show is really sexy. I feel like Master of None accomplishes that consistently also. So, I'm hopeful that, there's, I mean, that's,
That was the Meyerowitz thing was interesting because it started streaming the same day it opened.
Yeah, well, that's Netflix. They won't. There are no. They'll give you the theatrical release, but they will not. That's the best they'll do is a day and date, same day. They will not give you that window of a theatrical window. They're committed to their primacy in streaming. And
Well, I'm gonna let you go, but I'm gonna end it with a apropos of that. There's a great Marty Feldman line where he talked about a producer. Could have been a movie producer, was actually a television producer. And he said he's the sort of producer who gives you the funk, but he keeps the orgasm. And I think that Marty Feldman. David, thank you. This is above and beyond the.
Thank you, guys. Sorry for the delay getting online, but I've really enjoyed it, and best of luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.